This morning we have a few people from the FAO leadership that will give us some welcome and will also help us to place this particular event in the context of FAO's work. And we're grateful to have Eduardo Rojas, who is the Assistant Director-General and heads the Forestry Department here at FAO. And they will say a few words of welcome. Eduardo. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. I see also colleagues from Peru. And it's a pleasure to be here in this seminar on understanding development, developing and implementing cross-sectoral country investment plans. I understand that there are colleagues from 5 countries, from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This is a very welcome fact, and I see that we arranged this also together with USAID. And this is also very welcome. I know that we implement a project with USAID in Bangladesh exactly on the areas of capacity building and institutional reform and improvement. So big welcome to everybody here in FAO. You're coming in a very busy week with the World Food Day and the Committee on Food Security. So we're lucky to guarantee this room because it's not an easy week to meet here in FAO. So we have also huge opportunities to distract ourselves in lunchtime and evening with other seminars. I'm also very glad to see the colleague director of the TCI division, the investment center, which is our investment branch in FAO, Gustavo Merino, which will also be here with you this morning. And as you know, countries face big challenges around forest, especially in relation to climate change, which is a big issue in this moment. And you recall all the expectations towards Paris and the RED Plus process and the huge activities that have been conducted since Copenhagen in the countries through UN RED, through the Carbon Partnership of the World Bank, and so on, and by the countries directly, in order to protect the environment and to ensure fighting against rural poverty and food security. And there are countries that have had significant successes, like I would highlight, I see also Nepal, how much has been done in the area of tenure reform and community-based management. And of course, a very important, eventually invisible element here, and I like that we are working in this consensus with the investment center, is the increased financial resources that may be available for an inclusive growth of these countries, that we are not only in the frame of social policies, but we create capacity so that at the end we generate development in these rural areas that would overcome rural poverty and problems of food insecurity. And this issue is important to make it aware. It's relatively easy to make aware regarding forest protection, but just preserving the forest, so important it is for environmental service, will not solve many of the problems. We need also investments, restoration, and ensuring equitable conditions for the rural population that cannot be condemned just to move to cities and create bigger agglomerations around cities. And in your countries, you know this issue, especially I would say Bangladesh is a case of very dense populated population. So we need to ensure that in the rural areas we have also an inclusive growth. And in that sense, it's very important that we integrate different policies, different areas of work. That is, if we manage them as traditionally in insulation with a typical Cartesianic way, we will hardly ensure success. Everybody knows, making a link towards the food discussion, that the main challenge is not having sufficient food, but ensuring that all population can access to the available food. So it's an issue of at the end, of economic growth and social cohesion that would make much more an issue than just the production of food that may be not accessible or may be produced in other regions. There are lots of cross-sectoral issues. Forests are totally typical for that fact. And even climate change as well is an extraordinary cross-cutting issue. That's why it's so difficult to arrive to an inclusive agreement. But nevertheless, we hope that in Peru, significant steps will be done in 1.5 months in the COP, and then in Paris, a final agreement is, despite all the difficulties, ensured. Of course, the investment requires lots of elements, requires a supporting framework, that's very important, but requires as well the liquidity, availability, and of course, functioning financial sectors, where a good combination between the public and the private sector is crucial. And this capacity also to mobilize and divert the resources to investments in rural areas and in forests are important. Sometimes the resources are just directed to more infrastructures or activities that are linked more to the city part of an economy and not so much the rural areas. So in that sense, we look much forward to the results of the workshop, also focusing how we can mobilize and make these resources accessible. And at the end, that they are also accessible for everybody, as we are very committed to the development of communities and smallholders and not only of the big players. So in that sense, I'm very supportive of the fact that the several departments of the House have worked together, not the Forestry Department, the Investment Center, the Economic and Social Department, and is hosted in the Forestry Department. We have as well the Forest and Farm Facility. I see the manager, Jeff Campbell, and all our colleagues of the facility as well. In one of the cases, Bangladesh is of course one of the most vulnerable countries regarding climate change, from basically from the rise of the seawater and the waterfront, the lowlands of the countries. Despite all the challenges, high population density and poverty, the country is trying to become a middle-income country in less than 7 years. This, of course, requires a big development path, and in that sense, we look much forward from the part that FAO can support the country to do it. I know we have had, in the case of Bangladesh, very skilled representatives in the past. One was even awarded some years ago, and FAO is very committed in all the areas of its mandates, be agriculture, be fisheries or forestry, to support the country to become that middle-income country and to overcome rural poverty and food insecurity in the next years. And we know that the government is and the civil society, which is also very committed. The sustainable management of forests and natural resources as such is fundamental to that sustainable development. On one hand, preserving and protecting the country from floods and from sea and of storms from the sea and seawater rise, but for sure also ensuring good livelihood conditions for the rural population. And in that sense, we are working with the country in several fields, and we look forward to deepen that cooperation. Regarding the other 4 countries, Peru, Tanzania, Myanmar, and Nepal, we are working as well with your country. We have also very committed colleagues working there in the field. In Peru, it's one of the countries we are having more activities, especially around forest inventory, but not only about that. And thanks to the policy board that was conducted there in July, and then the COP in later this year, and then the COFLAC, the Latin American Forestry Commission, later next year, there will be strong opportunities to deepen the cooperation with the government that is very committed. And of course, Peru has a very important economic and social growth in the last 15 years. So the conditions, I would say, are quite ideal to moving forward, but it's one of the big forest countries of the world, so there are huge opportunities. In Tanzania, we have been as well working in both cases with the FAO Finish program, and a very advanced forest inventory with important capacity building has been conducted, and is quite advanced. And there will be as well opportunities very soon, in 2 weeks, with the policy board of UNRED to discuss with the government further intensification of our work. And as you know, the past COFO chair, Felician Kilahama, was of Tanzania, so there is also an important opportunities. We have a very committed FAO there as well. In Myanmar, there are huge opportunities now with the opening of the country to the world, and many donors are present, and we look forward to support the government in ensuring an inclusive development and overcoming rural poverty and food insecurity with activities, of course, also in the area of forest. And Nepal, I mentioned before, the important work that has been conducted in the past 30 years, that has been a kind of forefront in ensuring community-based management, and by this reducing deforestation and fighting against rural poverty. And we look forward to deepen this work. In fact, the first Mangani Maathai Award that was released last year, the second edition, was to the gentleman that was the key player for community-based forest management 30 years ago, and is a reference globally. So in that sense, there are new realities that call for investment in climate change, resilience and adaptation. We cannot separate both the part of adaptation and the part of mitigation as far as possible. That is more related to RED work. And of course, we don't want to see it only from an environmental perspective. We are in the front of trying to ensure that there is a strong social and also economic approach. If we want to speak about investment, there has to be an economic, but a very social-driven economic development approach. And in that sense, to support that both the rural resources and the population is adapted and preventing the potential negative effects of climate change. And this should offer new opportunities to access resources, basically through RED. And we need to have both a global action to ensure that this mechanism really materialize. For the moment, we still are in the early stages, but as well that these resources are available for those who need it and ensure that their investment has the highest possible multiplicator effect for economic development. So in that sense, we are very glad to have people from the three continents, and shows that, of course, these issues are very global. I can only wish you a very fruitful discussion this week, very fruitful both formal and informal progress, and that out of this work there may be potential activities, be on regional or global scale, or in your countries that we can conduct with the support of your government, and with sure and facilities a key element of it with a strong social civil society engagement, both from the tenure, from the communities and smallholders, but as well, I think it's a crucial issue in the future to engage the financial sector, be public or private, to ensure that these investments at the end really materialize and overcome the project and the early stages. So welcome to Rome, to FAO, and fruitful week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.